Sometimes our DIYs come out exactly as we planned, and sometimes they don't. In this video, I have several trash to treasures that I'll be sharing with you guys, including one that did not turn out as good as I had hoped. Hey there, my name is Yami. I am your Latina next door. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I love sharing high-end home decor and DIYs on a budget. If you enjoy videos like that, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and stick around by subscribing. As you know from my last DIY video, I am trying to use things that I already have on hand to create beautiful pieces for my home. We all have some items that we've purchased months, maybe even years ago. Anyone? We probably should have donated them by now. But for this video, I'm kind of glad I didn't. Now, before we get started, I know a lot of you like to get updates as to what's going on behind the scenes. Well, you guys know that we recently redid our dining room. Well, some changes are happening. So if you're interested in finding out what's going on, make sure to stick to the end of this video so you can get that update. Okay, let's get started. All right, so for our first DIY, we're gonna be using this old cigar humidor that I found in our basement. My husband, the Latino engineer, loves to enjoy a cigar with my dad. However, I purchased a nicer humidor for him, so he's got a much bigger box now, and this one is just not being used. And as you can see, it's a little beat up, and the burgundy color on the finish is just not our style. And so the first thing I did was get a sanding block and just sanded the finish just so I can make it less smooth and adhere the new paint a little bit better. Then once that was done, I decided to paint the top lid in my white chalk paint. The color that I use is white Adirondack. I list my most frequently used products in my description box below. Now, because the finish of this box was so dark and I was using stark white paint, I did have to give it 3 coats. In my last Thrifted DIY video, I got a lot of questions as to why I use chalk paint. The reason I like using chalk paint is because it adheres to pretty much every single surface, and it gives me the option to sand it down and make a smooth surface, unlike acrylic paints. In addition, I can use antiquing wax to change the color of the paint and give it a more aged, rustic look, and I can also add dark or light waxes to change the outcome of how I want the finish to be. I wanted this box to have a 2-tone look, so what I decided to do was use the same contact paper that I used on my tray in my last Thrifted DIY video. I made sure to measure each of the sides and cut the contact paper accordingly. I did go ahead and sand the bottom of the box as well, just so that my contact paper had better grip. And in order to get sharp edges, I did not roll the contact paper over the edges. I made sure it butted just up enough to get to that very edge as you see there. For the front corners, I did do the very sharp edges where they meet up, but then for the 2 back corners, I did wrap them around the corners and then I met them in the back and sealed the seams like you see right there where you can barely even tell there's a seam. I decided to give the box a little more interest by adding feet. These are the half beads that I used on my Look for Less mirror dupe. I still had a few left over, so I went ahead and used it and glued them to the bottom corners. Now I didn't show it here, but I did end up using some antiquing wax to make the little feet darker. My husband will be using this box in order to put his personal items when he comes home. Now, because I know it's going to get some serious use, I wanted to go ahead and sand the top as well as the edges and give it a little bit more of a worn look, because I know eventually it will get a little worn and chipped here or there. So I went ahead and did that anyways. I used a chip brush to remove the excess chalk paint. And then I used one of my kids' old socks along with some clear wax to seal the lid. I also get asked a lot why I use clear wax over my chalk paint. Well, because chalk paint has a very chalky finish, you do run the risk of actually getting fingerprints if you touch it with dirty hands. And if you wet it, you also run the risk of it actually coming right off. So you do need a clear wax in order to seal the paint so that that doesn't happen. Now, there are times where you can apply chalk paint and leave it without a sealer. This I would recommend for things that you would hang on your wall that wouldn't actually be touched on a regular basis. But if there is something that you're going to handle from time to time, or this one where you're going to be using it every single day, I do recommend you seal the paint with clear wax. I also like to let the wax cure completely overnight. I hope this answers most of your questions, and here is how the box turned out. Alright, so for this next one, we're going to be using these little pieces of felt that I have had for quite some time. As you can see, one of these has been cut out for something else. I have some cording that I bought a couple of years ago that was meant to reupholster a chair. Still haven't gotten to it, still have the chair, but here it is. And I also have this bucket from Dollar Tree that I bought during Christmas time. I absolutely love the shape. I didn't do anything for Christmas, so I thought I would do something now. Now, the first thing I did was place the bucket over the gray piece of felt. Now, I didn't have enough for it to all be white, so that's why you see me using a different color. I am going to use this to cover the inside bottom of the bucket. I want to make sure that not only the outside's finished, but also the inside as well. And something like these felt sheets that you get for $1 at your local craft store is actually really good to use to line some projects on the inside. Because I had more white felt sheets, I used these ones for the inside walls of the bucket. As I cut these to fit the inside of the bucket, I began to hot glue them now, and I started with the one on the bottom first. Then I added the inside walls. Because these are individual sheets and I needed to use several for the inside of the bucket, I did have to cut the ends at an angle because the top of the bucket was wider than the bottom. I made sure to cut down the felt to be the same height as the bucket, and then once the inside lining was done, I came around with the cording and began to glue it all around the bucket. Now, you probably already guessed that I am making a basket. However, I had several different types of rope laying around that were extra from previous projects, and I wanted to go ahead and use them up. So I'll be using them in this basket so that you can see how you can add extra dimension and interest to your DIY baskets without it just being one monotone piece of rope. After I was at about just over half of the basket, I took some leftover white rope from my little decorative balls that I did in my last thrifted video, and I decided to add it to this basket. Now, I only had enough to wrap it around twice, but I was determined to make a pattern out of this, and you'll see in just a minute. So after wrapping it around once, I cut the white ribbon. Then I added some of Dollar Tree's really thick nautical rope and added that around the basket twice over. Then I added the other piece of white rope and then added the old cording that I had originally wrapped the basket around with again. Now I did stop before getting to the top, and I decided to wrap my handles, and I like doing this before I wrap around the rest of the rope because you'll actually be able to cover up the ends of the handles where you have them covered with the rope that you're going up the basket. So I took some very thin leather strap pieces that are actually meant for jewelry, and I began wrapping the handles around. You guys, I have so many things for so many things. It is kind of nice to see what you have on hand and use them for projects like this. I'm just saying. After I finished the handles, I continued with the cording and began wrapping it around all the way to the top. I made sure to be very careful and cover every last little bit of red. And I also went back in the inside of the basket and added a little bit of cording to clean up the seams between the felt sheets. And here is how this basket turned out. Now for this DIY, I am going to be making over this little Kleenex box that I shared in one of my previous hauls, and I got it for 99 cents at my local Goodwill. Now it had really good bones and there was absolutely nothing wrong with it, but it was a little bit too light and too yellow for my liking. So I decided to use the coffee staining method. I have seen other DIYers do this and I wanted to try it on my own, so I thought this was the perfect time. I have been a little hesitant to do this because to me using coffee is almost sinful. However, I was able to use my husband's coffee, which is not that great, so I didn't feel so bad. Now, in order not to waste coffee, I did brew the same coffee over several times, so I didn't have to keep using brand new coffee every time. I placed the little Kleenex box inside and used something heavy on top to keep it down and left it there for several hours. I came back and put it in a glass pan and then actually sat it in front of a fan for several hours so that it would completely dry, and here is how it turned out. Now for this next DIY, I'm going to be using this old candle jar. I love saving these and cleaning them out because I just so happened to be at Michael's and see these beautiful little terrariums, and I thought I would recreate the same thing. Now because I'm using what I had, what I decided to do was take some of my Christmas candle sand that I used back in December and add it to this jar. I had some white rocks as well, and I decided to go ahead and add them on top of the sand to give it a little bit more of a coastal look. I always like to have a couple of little succulents on hand for little projects like this, and all I did was insert them into the sand as you see here. And then I played around a little bit with the different items that I can add to the top to give it a little bit more interest and not let it just look like a jar. I had first tested out the beads, but I didn't like how they looked. Then I tested the large Dollar Tree rope, didn't like that either. So then I settled with the last little bit of white rope that I had left over from the basket and just added it to the top. Now if I want this a little less coastal and more rustic, I could always add the jute just like they had at the store. Now this is a DIY that did not come out exactly how I had hoped. I have had this for several years now and I bought this on clearance at Hobby Lobby for only $6. The first thing I did was dust it off quite a bit because, again, I've had this for quite some time and it has been collecting dust. So I just used one of my chalk painting brushes that was a little bit thinner to get in all the nooks and crevices. Now, as you can see, this does have a mirror on the inside, which is going to cause my issue later on. But for right now, we're leaving it as is. We're not taking it apart because the mirror can't be removed. The way the backing is actually done on this piece, if I try to pry this thing open, I'm gonna break the mirror. So the mirror is gonna have to stay. I wanted this to look like a little bit more of a sophisticated piece, so I did not want to leave it this blue. It looks too little kids room for me. So I took the color Milk Jug by Folkart Plaid Paints in chalk paint and I began adding several coats. Now, while my final coat was drying, I cut down some of these poplar boards. These are the ones that I buy at Home Depot, and I use them for a lot of my projects. They come in 36-inch lengths, and they're only $1.05. Now, after I cut them down to fit the perimeter of the frame, I sanded them, and then I used some of my antiquing wax to give it a stain. So since I was not able to remove the mirror from the back of it, you can still see here how it shows the blue underside of the pattern of the piece in the reflection. Now, I thought that maybe I could distract a little bit from that by adding some of my aged glaze by rubbing it all over the piece. Once the antiquing wax was dry, as well as the little boards, I went ahead and used some wood glue to adhere them on to the frame. As evident in this image, you can see the blue reflection on the mirror, and that does get under my skin a little bit. I also think I probably should have left it the cream color instead of adding the aged glaze so that there was more of a difference between the frame and the pattern. But I can always change that back if I choose. However, I do think I want to try and see if I can figure out a way to remove the back mirror so that I can paint the back side of the pattern without damaging it. But if I can't, unfortunately, it'll probably have to stay this way. What do you guys think? Now my next DIY is going to be comprised of using leftover wood from DIY projects. Now I don't know about you, but I love the way these beautiful antique cutting boards look displayed in beautiful farmhouse kitchens. I have seen authentic ones run between $80 to $200, and even recreations on Etsy are about $40 to $60, and they're still not even food safe. So I decided to take what I had and just make my own out of leftover boards that we have had from leftover projects. Now, before anyone says that not everyone has tools in order to create projects like this, I totally understand. Not everyone is a DIYer. However, once you do start doing projects in your home, you start accumulating tools. And instead of just letting them sit in storage because we've already used them for previous projects, this is where they pay for themselves over and over again because you have them readily available when you want to recreate items just like this for yourself. Now here I have just been using whatever I have on hand in order to create my designs for my faux cutting boards. I made each one of them a unique shape because I wanted them to look like antique cutting boards. And I thought this was a lot of fun because you can create any shape, any kind of length, size that you want. After I had finished designing all of my boards, then it was time to take the jigsaw out and start cutting them out. Then once they were cut, all you need to do is drill a hole at the very top of each of the handles. I didn't show this part, but I did use the same color stain as I did on my plate rack. And then I came in with Debbie's Design Diaries clear wax and gave everything, both front and back, a full coat and let them cure overnight. Then I used some of those thin strips of leather and I tied them around the tops and through the holes so that I can hang them on my walls. I helped the Latino engineer figure out where I wanted them on the walls, and here is how they turned out. That was it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below which one of these was your favorite. I hope you all got some good ideas as to what you can do to things that you already have in your home and recreate them for your space. So as promised, we redid our dining room at the beginning of the year and everything worked perfectly. There was only one problem. We did not get to enjoy the fireplace unless we were sitting at the dining room table. And we actually use our fireplace to heat up this main living space whenever it gets really cold, especially in the evenings while we're at home. Our main living space has been the sunroom area ever since we moved here because it was more convenient for us to have a space that had a door during the time when we were renovating the rest of the house. Remember, we had to pull up all our floors and we had several issues that ensued after we ripped up our floors. So it was kind of nice to have a place over there where we can close the door and get away from all the dust and dirt and all that stuff. We've had our living room there ever since, and it's actually a multi-use space because the space is so long, and it's been working really well for us, except for that one thing where we just cannot sit in front of the fire. So we thought we would try out switching the dining room and the sunroom. This is presenting us with another problem. The sunroom is so long that it actually feels like a conference room with the really long table inside of it. So now I have to rework that space and make it a little bit more cozy and actually create more than one space in that room because it's too long for just one space. So I have to figure out what I'm gonna do and how I'm gonna fix it up to make it more cozy in that space. And if it doesn't work out, we can always change it back. So that's another thing that I'm working on right now, trying to redo that, and you guys are gonna see what I come up with in order to fix those challenges that we have in that space. And don't forget that we are working on our laundry to pantry makeover, and that's coming at you guys really soon. So that's it as far as updates as to what is going on behind the scenes. And I hope to see you guys next week for some more home decor and DIY. Until then, adios.